Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second of three webinars that Rogerwilco, OvatoyOU, and Julia Ahlfeldt are hosting to unpack some of the findings of the 2020 Digital Customer Experience Survey that we ran earlier this year. For this session, which is about exploring the link between customer experience and brand advocacy, we've got a star lineup with panelists from MultiChoice, Sanlam Investments, and Woolworths. More on them in a moment. Before we start, just a couple of quick housekeeping points. We're going to be recording the session, so we'll be sharing this with all of the individuals who registered to attend the webinar in the next couple of days. And if you've got a question for our panelists, we'll be holding a short Q&A session after the panel discussion. Please use the Q&A dialog box, which should be towards the bottom right of your screen. So to kick off, a little on our presenters. Julia, if you could introduce yourself.
Great. My name is Julia Ahlfeldt. I'm a certified customer experience professional and business advisor, guiding organizations on how to gain market leadership through customer centricity. I'm originally from the United States. You can probably hear from my accent, but I'm now based in Cape Town. I've worked with blue chip clients such as JP Morgan, American Express, ABSA, Old Mutual to deliver on their brand promise and foster customer loyalty through experiences. I try to bring a mix of global and local, leveraging my knowledge of global best practices and understanding of the local market to help unite organizations around the customer through things like journey mapping, leadership alignment, and experience design.
Mans, over to you.
I'm Amanda Reiki. I'm the founder and CEO of OvatoyOU and also of Imagination Alliance. Imagination Alliance has been going since 2001, and it's a brand and marketing consultancy business, but also with a big focus on research and gaining insights and data. OvatoyOU is a newer baby, having been founded in 2013, and OvatoyOU is a research platform, an online research platform with an associated database of 18,000 odd panelists. And we were really excited. We've participated in this for 2 years in a row, and it's really great for us because it's actually a good blend for me of using our tool to be able to understand more about growing robust brands. And this webinar in particular is about the link between brand advocacy and CX.
Great, and I'm Charlie Stewart. I'm the founder and chief executive of Rogerwilco. We're a digitally led marketing agency, so we naturally have got an enormous degree of interest and focus in customer experience and how people engage with brands online. So I think let's jump straight into the topic of today's conversation.
So you know why you're here. We conducted a survey earlier on in the year. It feels like a lifetime ago in April, May 2020. And all of the findings that you see in the research were part of that study. We spoke to 2,000 respondents, and it was a good spread, national spread, and age, race, province, and income nicely represented. We always have a bit of a female skew, but other than that, it was a really balanced panel that we spoke to.
So the topic for today is, what is the link between customer experience and brand advocacy? Well, our research, I think, found that the link is deeply entrenched. Customer experience really is the brand, and people's perception of an organization is very rarely based on a single interaction. It's more so derived from all of the experiences that people have, whether they're good, poor, or indifferent. I think what surprised us greatly with this year's research, and it's possibly because it was conducted during COVID, perhaps I think our shared challenges made people a little bit more receptive and keen to be positive. But this year we discovered just quite how willing people are to share news of their positive experiences. We found that 75% of our respondents would talk to their friends and family if they'd had a good experience. 43% said they'd post on social media, which was significantly up from last year's study. And a full 42% of people said they would buy more from a brand that pleases them. Given this, it begs the question as to whether we as marketers are too invested in customer acquisition to the potential detriment of customer retention. A few years ago, Harvard Business Review published a couple of research papers. The first one found that it's anywhere between 5 and 20 times more expensive to win a new customer as it is to keep an existing one. Whereas the second paper discovered that increasing customer retention by 5% can grow bottom line profit by anywhere between 25 and 95%. So there's a very clear, I think, stack of evidence that supports the importance of customer experience in delivering advocacy.
Yeah, just the counter to what Charlie's just outlined is that bad experiences can always have a long-lasting damage on the brand. The problem with this has always been true, but the problem with this now is that, as we know, people are likely to share this in a much more broader audience through social media. So more than half the sample said that they'd received poor online service from a brand, and 56% said they'd share that with friends and family, and 32% would post and share on social media. 39% said that they'd never use the brand again. So I think the reality of it is, what we've always known as marketers is that this gets amplified outside of it. So it's not, you don't lose one relationship, you risk losing many, or at least having a negative impact on your brand by delivering a poor experience. And here are just some quotes that demo that from the survey, some verbatims. And I think the webinar we did this morning, one of the key things that came out was that many of the issues that people have with brands online actually relates a lot more to the way the value proposition or the offer has been designed than to the actual online delivery. So, for example, here, Wish is very bad, long delivery time, and products are low quality and they do not look like the picture. In essence, that's an issue with the brand itself and the products that have been listed there, and much less to do with the actual depiction of them on the site. And then the counter, and there's a Woolies mention. I love Woolies and Superbalist, amazing service, and I always post on social media. So although this is something that we know and have always known as marketeers, it's nice to see it ratified and reflected back in the verbatims that come out of the research.
So some would say that brands no longer control the reputation, consumers control this, and it's determined by experiences. Our research supported the notion that experiences are a driver of repurchase and that consumers are not at all shy about sharing their experiences with others. This makes them potentially powerful advocates or possibly brand damaging detractors. Traditional marketing strategy puts a lot of emphasis on customer acquisition rather than retention, achieved through the realization of the brand promise. In today's world, that's a pretty short-sighted approach, we think. And it begs the question of whether or not brands are putting their efforts in the right places. It does no good to pump money into bringing customers into your restaurant, your store, or your app if they're going to be unsatisfied, leave in a huff, and tell everyone they know about how awful it was. And with that, I'd like to move on to our panel of experts to help us unpack these points and explore how organizations can maximize the potential of the link between experiences and advocacy. With us today, we have Clint Payne from MultiChoice, Charlene Van Ziel from Woolworths, Ya'eesh Cader from Sanlam Investments. And before we dive into the questions, I'd like to invite each of the panelists to share a little bit about themselves. Ya'eesh, would you like to kick things off?
Sure. Thanks very much for having me. So my name is Ya'eesh Cader. I have been in digital for, I think Friday this week will be 16 years. Primarily focused on retail and financial services, both on the agency and client side. Currently look after digital for the Sanlam Investments group. Again, that comprises of the Sanlam brand, Satrix as well. We currently have, I think it's just over R500 billion in assets that we look after for our investors. I manage the digital and the online marketing teams, as well as the e-commerce function. And I guess I've worked on brands like Investec, Pam Golding, Adidas in my previous lives as well. So yeah, looking forward to this discussion.
Clint, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Clint Payne. I work for MultiChoice. I'm currently on a project which is really exciting and been a great learning curve for me about how do you replace your technology with a CX flavor. So, you know, can you replace an entire tech stack and including with that your entire digital offering and style it from a customer point of view, become business-led and customer inspired to give you a new way customers can interact with your brand. So I think I've learned a hell of a lot in that process, and I'm looking forward to today because I think it's the link between CX and brand is something you can't divorce the two from each other.
Great, can't wait to hear your insights. And Charlene, last but most certainly not least, would you like to share a little bit about yourself with the participants?
Sure. So looking after customer Woolworths, I get lots of emails about customer care solutions. So it's not customer care. So within Woolworths, I'm predominantly looking after insights and analytics from a customer perspective, our loyalty program, our direct marketing, as well as our customer architecture that sits behind it. And customer experience has always been woven into most of the roles that I've had. I've actually worked across industries. So I started out in consulting, moved across to financial services and insurance, then onto FMCG, telco, and now finally into retail. And it's quite interesting, the similarities across industries in terms of the challenges these companies face when it comes to customer and when it comes to customer experience and trying to get organizations aligned behind it and overcoming a lot of the legacy issues.
Looking forward to hearing your perspective from a variety of different industries. So our research found a clear link between positive experiences and advocacy on the one hand, and negative experiences and brand detractors on the other. So over time, advocacy impacts the business bottom line. I think all of us here would support that. But the question is then, are businesses effectively investing their time and energy to earn loyalty and advocacy? And if not, what do you think needs to be rebalanced? And I think I'm going to pitch this question first to Charlene, because I think given your experience working for a number of different organizations across a number of different industries, I think you've probably seen this play out many times over. So very interested to hear your take on this.
Look, I think every company at its core wants to retain customers. Every company at its core wants to have advocates. I think the challenge comes in is that longer term advocacy. So you see a lot of short-term initiatives coming in. So give customers additional value, give them additional rewards, give them additional things that they get as a free gift, etc. So those kinds of activities come in an attempt to grow more advocates. But I mean, like the example you put on the screen, if you're not coming to the party in terms of your service, if you're not coming to the party in terms of consistent product delivery, it doesn't matter some of these short-term things that you put in place to win customers over. And what you see over time, it boils down to two things. It boils down firstly to consistency, and it boils down to relevance. So consistency is very much in terms of that service delivery and that product delivery over time, which gives you that baseline experience. It's people being comfortable in the knowledge that they interact with you, they buy something with you, they either have a service interaction with you, and they're going to have a consistent, good experience every single time. And that's what actually grows that long-term advocate. And that's almost your minimum expectation. When you put in these additional things where you go the extra mile, that creates these wow moments where people want to share and want to talk about. Your consistent experiences is going to give you almost a steady stream of recommendation and reputation, whereas the wows is what someone will really go onto social media and talk about. When I talk to relevance, and that's more the ability to evolve with consumers. And I think that's also where sometimes companies can struggle a little bit. And it's more about really getting insight in terms of what's driving them and what's driving different segments of consumers and what are they actually looking for. Because once you set that baseline in terms of consistency, a lot of companies will then measure it and think they're doing absolutely fine because they're still delivering consistently across those measures, but actually the customer expectation and need is shifted. So it becomes critically important to constantly have a pulse in terms of what's actually important to consumers. You might put in a certain service experience or an element in that value chain as the most important for you to deliver to customers, but actually their expectation is now shifted to something different. So even if you look from a COVID point of view, initially the consumer's biggest concern was safety. So being able to go out and if they needed to shop and have safety while they were doing that and know that they're going into a safe environment. As the virus has progressed and as the different lockdown levels have been coming into play, now that's shifting more to value. People are looking for value. They're looking for the right products now based on how financial circumstances have changed. And also within that context, if you look at some of the behavioral change that has now happened, people are engaging with content a lot more. So you're talking about people going onto social media. You find use of Instagram, use of Facebook is far greater than it's been before. Engagement on email and a lot of these channels is also a lot higher because people have time. But the type of content that they're looking for is very different. So you find people Googling home solutions, different recipes that they want to try. So it's understanding where they're at in terms of how things are changing and being able to give them the content that they're looking for. So content, interestingly enough, and how brands have a conversation with consumers is now more than ever becoming more a part of that overall brand experience. And I think it is something that companies need to start addressing more. Some brands more than others. Some brands have greater latitude in terms of the breadth of content that they cover, but it's about right sizing in terms of your brand or your company and your offering, what customers are expecting and where you can credibly go.
Yeah, I think the goalpost for customer expectations is something that's constantly changing. And in this year, it's changing in a way that nobody could have ever expected, and it keeps changing. I think that's a really good point. I'd be really interested to hear from the other panelists how you guys have seen the kind of goalpost shift in terms of customer expectations through the course of this year and COVID.
I think also I'll just jump in very quickly. I think from our side we have, and I mean I mentioned this in quite a few different forums as well. The online usage, online sales that we've seen since lockdown started in the investment space, which I mean surprised absolutely everybody. One would have thought that again with the financial issues, job losses and so on, that people necessarily wouldn't be investing, wouldn't be saving. But I mean, we've seen massive, huge increases in the online sales that we've actually had with regards to investment product and so on, which has again quite nicely reframed the I guess the old school mentality much towards a sort of a new age side of things. So Sanlam, I think we just turned 100 last year. Again, very sort of old school initially in their approach, very much a face-to-face kind of business. Everyone's parents, grandparents have invested with Sanlam. So I guess now trying to sort of reframe it towards the millennial, the younger audience. The impact of lockdown surprisingly has been quite a surprise in sort of online sales side of things. So again, it's helped to sort of reframe us and reposition us quite nicely within the business. Again, obviously, it puts more focus into, I guess, resource allocation for next year, budget and so on. Which I mean, if we are sort of going to ride this wave that now seems to be growing, I mean, with sales increasing in excess of over 100% just in this the sort of 3-month period, and that's month and month. It's been quite a I guess a positive roller coaster.
Clint, what about you? What have you seen at MultiChoice?
The most surprising thing for us is the shift from traditional sort of telephonic-based service through to digital service. Because as lockdown came into effect and we had to limit the number of staff in the building, our ability to take calls in our call centers was greatly reduced. And it was one of those things where we found that service for the first time shifted into digital space by means of necessity, rather than trying to incentivize people or encourage people to use digital self-service. They had to shift there because we were just not, in a position where we could offer them other services in face-to-face environments. So that was a really interesting shift for us. I think overall, not necessarily related to COVID, but overall, the shift of our base from a very traditional DSTV kind of digital satellite television to a connected digital online experience, I think that shift continues and it starts to gain momentum, and that shift is evidenced in the fact, if you look at the products that we're planning to bring out this year, they're going to be a couple of new decoders that are all going to be connected. There's one that is in fact only just a streaming device, that kind of stuff. We've got new price plans coming out that allow customers to sign up for DSTV with just without a decoder, just online. That shift has been a very steady march into the digital space. It will, however, I think, take us from a satellite TV point of view, it's going to take us a little while to get into a space where we will become a fully digitally enabled organization. There is still a lot of runway left for pay TV in SA and across the continent. So it's been a really interesting shift into the digital space.
So what's clear from what I'm hearing from all three of you is that you definitely have your finger on the pulse of what's going on with your customer base, and you guys are seeing what's changing in their lives, how their preferences and expectations are changing, and understanding what needs to happen in terms of delivering experiences that are in line with the brand promise, to align with customers' needs. How has that been communicating that back to the rest of the organization? Have they been open to this? Have they been open to modifying experiences to meet the needs of customers, or have you met resistance there?
So I'll go and ask my side. It's actually been an interesting journey, because while before the organization was generally interested in the customer voice, I mean, we always have been from a Woolworths point of view, that interest magnified tenfold. So what you find is, because things were shifting and the need to really understand where customers were at to be able to meet those expectations over this time was magnified. So a lot more requests for information, a lot more engagement with it, and not just your usual who would engage with that information, far deeper within the organization, just in terms of wanting to understand what it is the customers are after and what needs to be adapted to be able to service that need. A very good example in our environment is online. So we saw a massive amount of people, and I think everyone did, customers now shifting to online. So we very quickly had to look at those experiences and that overall online experience and see where could we make improvements quickly and what would take a little bit longer to put into place. So I've actually found it's been quite a positive experience in terms of how the organization has engaged and really wanted to understand what was changing and how do we adapt accordingly.
No, I have to support what Charlene says. So that whole old expression, never waste a good crisis. I think as people kind of got into a space where they didn't quite understand how their own lives were going to be affected by COVID, I think it translated particularly in our environment into the key stakeholders going, if I don't know how I'm going to deal with this, how are customers going to deal with this? Who can I ask? And the really good thing has been, there's been sort of a natural flow towards asking the customer experience team, because they're the teams with the pulse on what customers are really feeling at any given moment. So yeah, very much a what's happening now kind of vibe happening in the office at the moment.
I think that that age-old saying, or rather, it's not really age-old. The one that says the COVID has had the biggest impact on the company's digital transformation. I mean, that rings true 100% for us as well. I guess the positive thing is we've sort of laid the foundation over the last few years. I think, like I said, that the uptake or the uptake has actually surprised everyone. And again, it's this increased demand. I think for the first time during COVID. Again, traditionally people seem to invest via paper-based form, speaking to an advisor. For the first time, our online sales actually exceeded our sort of face-to-face interactions, obviously. And I mean, that just again put massive focus on the, I guess, the need to sort of beef up the sort of digital capability. So definitely, I think within the business itself, there's a lot more interest. Not that I guess there wasn't. It's obviously just been amplified significantly in terms of what are people saying about us. What are the customer experience sort of opportunities, or what are some of the learnings that we've had? People are more than ever actually, and seeing this senior management, exco level as well, actually interested in the analytics of a website and analytics of did the email perform well? How did that particular campaign do? I mean, these are things that they would never necessarily be interested in. For them, it's about how many radio ads did we get out? How many people saw our TV ad? How many people, saw our billboard? In social and those kind of things were sort of very much there and thereabouts. But I think now, particularly with lockdown and COVID, there's been a massive spike in interest, and of course, there's more and more importance being placed on digital as well.
Well, it seems to me that COVID created a situation where, in order to survive and thrive, a business had to do much more than throw lots of money and energy at advertising. You couldn't just count on trying to drive up revenue by smashing more money at traditional advertising efforts. That wasn't going to work. That actually it was a time to re-examine what is the customer experience. And it also forced, empathy and reflection, and probably forced people to, as Clint said, put themselves in the customer's shoes, because if they're having to deal with it, so is the customer. That's quite interesting. And then, kind of going forward, what strategies do you think are going to work for cultivating brand advocates? So COVID might create an opportunity for connecting with new customers or building trust with existing customers, strengthening those relationships. But how do you recommend cultivating those brand advocates and leveraging those relationships? Ya'eesh, do you want to kick this one off for us?
Sure. I think, and it's almost douchebaggy to say just keep on doing what we've been doing. But again, it is a bit more difficult in the investment space. So obviously, once lockdown hit, markets crashed, markets tanked. As a result, and to touch on your earlier point, our budgets were slashed by 50 to 75% simply because as a result of the entire market taking a massive plummet. And again, there was a shift towards this inward focus now, not so much about marketing, not so much about advertising, getting your voice out there. Now it's about looking at all of the clients that you have. What are we actually doing with them? How are we actually engaging with them? Rather than trying to seek new clients, how do we actually manage and engage with the clients, serve the clients that we actually have? So that shifted significantly. So I think, as I mentioned, there's been a massive sort of re-energizing of the sort of digital space within the broader Sanlam business. Someone made a tongue-in-cheek comment. I think it was the second month of lockdown, to say that the digital team's stock price within the group has sort of skyrocketed as a result, just simply because, again, there's now massive emphasis on doing things a lot more digitally, and I think that again has made it, I think, extremely easy for us to, I guess, get brand buy-in, senior buy-in in terms of doing things differently. There's a lot more focus, obviously, on doing sort of digital customer engagement, digital customer surveys, customer service as well through WhatsApp, things which, I mean, the business traditionally would have been a lot, quite scared to sort of venture into for various legal and compliance issues. But now that we've sort of digitized our entire call center service as well, there has been a definite shift, and again, a positive shift towards sort of just changing things up from sort of an old-time legacy environment to one that's a lot more nimble, a lot more digital, a lot more online, which, I mean, has been obviously massively positive for the client as well.
And does delivering those kind of wow experiences in a world that is more digital, is that more difficult? Because I think that's an important part of if you want, brand advocates who are going to be out there kind of singing your praises, to Charlene's point earlier, those wow moments really go a long way. How has that been, with the shift in interactions from in-person to digital? How has that been?
I think with a little sort of insight, there are so many moments that you can, that if you really think about it, you could really exploit. We have a great little Chinese restaurant that is actually, it doesn't have, sprung up during lockdown, doesn't have a physical location. It's a sort of, I imagine, works from a home somewhere, but you can buy the food online, and you can buy it via a food delivery app. And they started off at the beginning of lockdown and were doing really, really well, very good quality food. And the moment alcohol was banned, one day after ordering a meal, I got a free bottle of wine included in my meal. And it really struck me that there are just moments when you can really think about, if you think about experiences, think about how customers are operating in the world, how they are how their lives have been affected. Thinking about it from a customer perspective offers you opportunities to do those little wow moments, and to enable those little wow moments. So, more than ever, COVID is going to completely change the way we work, the way we live for the next 5 to 10 years. I don't want to go back to the office. I love working from home. What does that mean for me as a customer? And how can I think about that contextual to my own customers? What can I do for customers who used to be in the office, but now are working from home? What are the things that I can enable for them? And I think that that's the important lesson that we need to take from here, is that the old way of thinking about customers isn't going to cut it. We need to think about customers in the new world. And the best reference for thinking about customers in the new world is, how has your world changed for you? And then extrapolate that feeling out to your customer base and see what opportunities arise.
Yeah, and I think, Clint, linking into that, if you look at how people have traditionally mapped their journeys and where companies, those moments that they chose to wow customers, you have to remap that. You have to look at different ways that customers are going to interact, and you can find those moments. So online, in terms of, different recommendations that can come through to customers. Even at a point of delivery, you've got a chance to differentiate there as well. And I think in terms of a company impact, when things start to get a bit tougher, traditionally things like voice of customer programs, research often is the thing that gets cut. And I think the guidance is not to cut those, because if you're wanting to understand where customer behavior is shifting, you need to stay on top of that so that you can stay relevant, that you can find those moments. But then linked to that, you'll find, and I think every company experiences this, internally your lead times to be able to deliver something different, something new, is usually quite long. We've got quite long development timelines, traditional ways of collaborating. And now from a company point of view, that you're in a very different circumstance in terms of how you bring something to market from a delivery point of view. Companies also need to pivot in terms of how they design and how quickly they can land things, because the behaviors and the expectations are changing faster than they've ever done before, and you need to be able to keep up with it.
I think just on your point of being agile in terms of these wire moments, I think definitely what lockdown has done is almost hit pause on the entire online ecosphere, if you want to call it. It's now this complete silence. People obviously sat at home. They have a lot more time. They're a lot more critical of what's happening, simply because they have a lot more time to sit back, experience what's my experience being on Woolies versus what's my experience being on a Sanlam or OUTsurance. So these comparisons are now become a lot more critical. So I think the wow moments become, I think now more than ever, a lot more difficult to actually achieve, because people again have that time to sit back and critically analyze every single piece of creative that comes in front of them. So I think anyone is going to sort of hit the ball out of the park, it's going to be extremely difficult to sort of almost stand out of a crowd that's now becoming increasingly competitive, and again just very congested, because I think the shift, as I mentioned, the shift earlier massively towards digital online, I mean, it has been happening for years. It's now just been ramped up significantly. So now I guess your share of voice becomes more important, not so much on the radio side or TV side. But now again, how do you create, again, without pumping massive amounts of money, and how does your concept actually resonate with an audience that is deflated, scared, sitting at home? How does your message actually, and what your brand purpose is, how does it actually speak to that audience? I think creating those little mini or micro wow moments probably is going to be a lot more difficult, has been difficult this year. But I definitely think to Clint's point as well, into next year, I think it'll be really difficult for all of us sitting on the table to try and create those wow moments moving forward.
But to your point on that, your competitors, not everyone, because people are critical and they're sitting back and they're having digital experiences. Like for us, we're no longer just competing with other retailers. We're competing with the online experiences that they're having with everyone, because that now sets a new standard. So your competitive landscape is also going to shift.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I think that historically, a lot of brands have relied on the human interaction side of things to sort of almost like, yeah, there's the term greenwashing where people are, talking about things that are eco-friendly, and they sort of coat something superficially. I think that a lot of businesses have kind of been like service washing things, coating kind of bad experiences with lots of smiles and friendliness, and kind of hoping for the best with that. And what COVID has done in this shift to more digital interactions is it's taken that away. And it's also limited the ability to deliver those wow moments through human interaction. So you've got to think more strategically about how you build those into the customer journey. And, the example that Clint provided, where, that requires quite a lot of forethought and, thinking about, what are customers' needs? What do they really want right now? And how can we deliver that? It's not something that you can do sort of on the spur of the moment with interpersonal interactions. Also interesting, this idea of becoming more agile and reducing lead times. But as experiences become, move more into the kind of the digital space or the content space, it's more than just kind of a human interaction service side of things. I would guess that also brings about more conversations around the ROI of customer experience. So then that puts on, those working in the customer experience roles within organizations need to have those conversations with business leaders. How have you guys found, making the business case for investing in things that are going to improve experiences that will ultimately improve brand advocacy?
I think I'll jump in very quick. So, I mean, again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we almost fortunate in that we've done most of the paving a good few years ago, and we launched something quite I think innovative in our space sometime last year, after spending quite a fair chunk of budget. And I guess the questions being asked in the exco obviously were around how much have you made this month? Is it becoming profitable? When will you reach profitability? Now again, the shift is, again, as I mentioned, it's moving towards senior leaders actually wanting to understand things like, what is the customer experience been? What is your ROI? What is your conversion rate? How many people are you bringing in? That obviously is important, but how many people are dropping off? Where are they dropping off in your entire sales funnel? How can we actually help improve that? Because again, the budget can't be shifted towards the traditional face-to-face interactions anymore. Online obviously now becomes the primary means of selling and distribution. So in a world with, as Sanlam is very much distribution and face-to-face orientated, trying to shift that dynamic towards a sort of primarily online sales approach. Again, has placed a lot of importance and focus on deep diving in terms of what the actual process is doing. How successful is your online process? What can we do to improve? So I mean, like I said, that's coming from the top down, which I mean has been massively fantastic to sort of be a part of. But yeah, I think it's only going to grow up again, or grow from now well through next year, as we sort of shift more budget towards I guess the online space and the online sales space, and I guess online becoming more the primary distribution platform. At the same time, what Sanlam obviously has to do is to ensure that we don't alienate our distribution force. Our advisors bring in, the majority of our flows of our assets. So now it's about how do we digitize them? How do we ensure that these small mom and pop advisor brokerages across the country are almost geared to be future fit? How do we empower them to ensure that they also, ramp up and are part of this fourth industrial revolution? That they can also use digital to obviously onboard and create and sort of streamline their business processes as well. So it's not so much just in terms of Sanlam selling, but also Sanlam enabling by digital. So I mean, there's a lot of time being spent now, a lot of resources, a lot of planning that's happened during lockdown. I guess for this massive push that will come definitely next year.
Fantastic. Clint?
I think for us, the big thing has been to be very, very clear and pointed about what you want to achieve. And, I think a typical example is that when we started looking into, what is our omnichannel position? I think that we need to be really, really careful with phrases like omnichannel. You seek to be omnichannel. I think that that's a mistake. I think one has to contextual to your organization, define exactly what it means for you. When you've defined what it means for you, you can deliver against that. For example, if you're going to define an omnichannel strategy, on which channels will you be omnichannel? For which customers? For which experiences? Don't just say we're going to be omnichannel. That's too broad, it's too wide. Define exactly what you want. Because by defining exactly what you hope to achieve, it narrows your focus, it gives you a very, very clear and distinct goal about what you want to achieve, and it'll also help you define and calculate your ROI. And that would be my real learning over the last year. Be incredibly specific about what you want to achieve. Be really pointed in your explanation.
So yeah, I'll echo Clint on that. I think the trap that many customer experience initiatives have fallen into is they go very broad. You have these massive blueprints, you have these massive ambitions, and it becomes very difficult to focus the organization behind a specific objective and achieve it end to end, and put very, very hard measures behind it, and measures that are in a way black and white. You either did or you didn't. It's not up for debate whether it achieved something or it didn't achieve something. And I think it's quite interesting, especially if I look at the different organizations that I've worked for, those where it's embedded into the culture and the DNA, you'll find those conversations are a lot easier. There's a lot less skepticism of, did it actually achieve this, yes or no? But I have worked for companies where there is an enormous amount of skepticism. And it doesn't help just to provide an NPS metric and put it onto people's scorecards, because it's just a case of, okay, well, we're improving, we're not improving. You've got no idea why. It's not linked to anything. So, it's on the scorecard, but it's weighted in a very low manner, and it's not really paid attention to. So I think if you're going to do initiatives, per Clint's point, be very specific with hard measurables. But if you also want to track your overall customer experience, like we're currently doing now, we don't just have one NPS metric. We have probably got one of the more complicated NPS measures in terms of customer satisfaction, but to really understand the drivers and where the experience is falling down. And then different areas in that value chain own very hard, specific measures that in their entirety contribute to the overall experience, but you need to give people measurements which they are responsible for, that they can own and that they can influence. It then all rolls up to the top, and then you can actually link your NPS to a more core ROI, like your number of customers that are coming in, as well as their average revenue per customer.
And once you've done the work to identify the KPIs within your value chain, it probably makes it a little bit easier to make the case for interventions to improve customer experience or improve processes that will then improve customer experience, because you can tie those back to very specific tasks, activities, actions that are done by specific teams, and you're not having to link everything you're doing back to some nebulous NPS score that is influenced by 10,000 things. It's like looking at gross domestic product or something, and changing one thing with one industry, and then you sit there and you wait, does gross domestic product change? Well, no, it didn't, because all these other things happened. I think that's NPS, and relying just on NPS is a dangerous path. Yeah. We've had a really interesting question come through from the participants that I wanted to sort of pose to the panelists. The question is around how to maintain connectedness with customers right now in these days of COVID, and as more and more experiences shift into the digital space. How do you maintain that connectedness, and what is connectedness now?
I think if I had to speak for I guess the Sanlam brand, it's I think now more than ever being authentic, being human. So we spoke about it a little bit earlier around kids running in the background, through a Zoom call, or your dog barking in the background as well. I think particularly with regards to your engagements, whether it's through the call center, whether it's through email communications or social media, the content that you're putting out there, the content strategy that you're obviously using with regards to your blog portals, or however else you sort of see the content. Writing content now that's relatable and authentic, I think, is probably the way to actually maintain. We are human. We're all going through this at the very same time. These are new experiences for everybody. I think, especially what we're trying to do in the investment space as well, is to try and remove that sort of barrier between us and clients, but at the same time, we are clients, we are humans as well. We all Satrix clients or Sanlam clients or so on. So we go through the emotions as well. So for example, when the market crashes, there's this run on call centers, simply because people are freaking out because is my pension fund gone? So again, being a bit more empathetic, I think, to your clients, and ensuring that your tone of how you engage them, either via the call center, via social, via mail, that it is one of a human, and not that we've, I guess, been robotic in the past, but I think now even more so, it's sort of elevated in terms of the tonality and I guess how we engage with clients. So again, from my perspective as well, definitely that is how I would, I guess, frame the improved connectedness. I wouldn't say stop doing what you're doing in terms of social content, but again, just be more visible, but again, be more authentic. And I don't say push product, but again, try and relate to what people are going through. Try and relate to what you, as I guess, as a Sanlam investor, what you've gone through. People are scared. People want to save for their kids. People are looking to take out gap cover for their parents or life insurance. We've all gone through it. So again, put your content out there in a way that I guess relates to you or how you've experienced the brand. So again, be authentic in that way. So I think that's probably how I'd best characterize the connectedness for our brand, at least.
I think what's going to be really interesting for us is the gap that content, and when I talk about content, I mean content as in Game of Thrones, the gap that we're going to be getting or that we have experienced and will start to experience more. If you start looking at the shows that are being produced and how they're being produced, things are going online. A lot of stuff games are being played to virtual audiences. That's really interesting, because when you have a virtual audience, how do you we're all used to hearing people cheer or laugh. And when you have a virtual audience, do you pipe that in? Do you make that fake? Will people realize it's fake? I think there are a whole bunch of new challenges that COVID bring us that are going to be incredibly interesting. One that I'm going to be looking at really carefully is, as the United States, who are the biggest producers of some of our content, as the production of content and movies slows due to COVID, that will have an eventual knock-on effect on what we're able to broadcast, because you can't broadcast what's not being produced. So it'll be interesting to see how that's going to affect us in the longer term.
I was going to mention on Clint's point, I've tried to watch football matches where you've sort of had the audio, plugged into the background, the crowd's cheering, and also matches without. And honestly, the ones without, I've lasted about 10 minutes max. The need for that background noise for me as a fan, I can't watch it without it. Sorry, I need it. Guess Stomper one, yeah. Exactly, no, but still, it's still, you sort of get this emotional connection with what you're watching, even though it's sort of someone sitting and clicking a button post the shot on goal or the save. You still feel that it relates to what you're feeling. But I think if it's just kick the ball and there's silence, I think it's sort of just for me at least, it dampens the experience significantly.
I think from our perspective, it's slightly different because people are still coming out and buying food. So you maintain that customer connection in terms of them coming into our store. But you need to still show up. You need to still show up in terms of the consistency of the experience. A clean, safe store, the products that are available, our staff that are friendly and are always willing to help. It is slightly more challenging because, customers have traditionally had quite a close relationship with our staff. So there's a little bit of distancing that comes in, even in the personal interaction. But then also, if you look at how you show up in terms of the products that people are looking for, you'll see there's been quite a lot announced in terms of the investment in price from a Woolworths point of view. So bringing down the cost of something like chicken, which is something that consumers, they use a lot and they buy a lot of. Price investment in terms of quite a few key items from a clothing point of view. So it's been relevant to what customers are wanting now. And then even as an example of how some experiences you can now try and translate into a virtual space, you run these experiments thinking, will they work or will they not? We've done some virtual wine tastings with experts. Initially, when we did the first one, we thought, okay, how's this going to go? But, consumers have really engaged with it and really enjoyed it. You get to have and try the wine in your own home. There's no one around. You can enjoy it how you want to enjoy it. And even in terms of, makeup and skincare, we've gone on Instagram and done, a couple of influencers and experts showing customers how to apply things, talking through the products. And the interesting thing is where people ordinarily wouldn't have had time to sit around for half an hour in a store while someone goes and explains something or demonstrates something to them, in the comfort of their own home, they can just leave it on in the background or watch it directly. So again, it's about looking for those new opportunities where you can create new experiences, and that actually strengthens that connection.
Excellent. We've just had sorry, go ahead, Clint.
It always astounds me, that job that your boss said was never able to be done from home because you had to be in the office. Well, guess what COVID has taught us? You can now be at home and just be as productive as you ever have been in the past. One of the really unique experiences I've had at the office this year is that a colleague of 20 years left. And obviously you can't do a farewell, but we had a Teams meeting scheduled, and at the appointed time, early that morning, a box of goodies arrived, delivered to my home, and we all broke out the box of nibbles and the bottle of wine, and we all sat in front of our computers and said goodbye to a colleague and friend of 20 years. These things can be done with a little bit of planning, and if we can do them for ourselves in our offices, what can we do for our customers? I think it's just a matter of thinking out of the box.
I love that. That's really creative and a great way to, keep that human connection alive in the time of lots and lots of digital interactions. We've had a question come through kind of on that. How do you deal with online and digital fatigue in a way that makes people want to come back? So all the brands out there are trying to maximize their digital interactions. We're all spending, more time on our computers in front of our devices. How do you be the brand with the experiences that really stands out and encourages customers to come back?
I think if I can quickly talk on the investment side, the investments aren't sexy. Saving is not sexy. So for us, like it's a bit difficult once the purchase has been made. How do we then engage with clients and to ensure that again throughout the plethora of assets that they are getting, how do we ensure that they actually want to engage us, actually want to read what we're putting out there? And I guess for us, it's about making our content relatable. So again, just to speak back to the earlier point, if the markets crash, what does it mean for me? If Trump loses his presidency at the end of the month, I guarantee you there's going to be, or rather next week, sorry, how does it impact my investment? So again, it's making what's happening in the world relatable to your particular circumstance and your particular investment. Again, everybody cares about their nest egg. Everybody cares about their kids' savings and so on and so on. So again, it's about whatever's happening now, make it relatable to the person or rather the investor who's invested in that particular fund. And that again is where I guess CRM and data segmentation, comes into play. It's around particular investors in this particular fund, and this fund has done really, really badly. Proactively engage with those guys. Tell it's going down simply because of these reasons, but these are the reasons why you should stay the course. Don't put out your money, or rather, just it's almost like a virtual hand on shoulder. You're sort of comforting them. So I guess that's sort of from our side how we try to make sure that the content that we put out there post sale is, I guess, engaged with, but also relevant to a particular individual, and not obviously bulk mailing around. I guess brands doing this or brands doing that, but specific people who are investing in specific funds for specific reasons. Again, speak to those goals. I mean, we have 5 goals that we all our investors usually save for. So again, if you're saving for your kid, speak about why the market run is happening now, and how it impacts their particular investment for fees in I guess a few years time. So I guess we try to make it a bit more relatable. That's I guess the best thing that we can do, particularly now where there's just so much content out there.
I think we may have lost Julia briefly. Julia is back. Well, while she comes back, I think there were a couple of other questions that came through on the Q&A. One was, how do you audit experiences along the digital path to purchase?
For us, the most important thing is, sorry, if I may, for us, the most important thing is identify the customer objective. A lot of times you can measure micro moments in the digital journey, and you can look at how many people answered an ad, how many people clicked on a button. Those are all great measures and markers along the way, particularly if you are in the digital space. But if you're really serious about understanding what customers want, look at what the customer's objective is, and how many people at the start of that journey actually end up achieving their objective at the end of the journey. That for me has been the biggest learning, and the thing that we've had to concentrate on quite a bit.
We have, I think, almost reached our time for today's session. So I think probably we need to wrap up. I know you guys are all very busy and have been very gracious with your time today. Thank you very much. A hearty thank you to our fantastic panelists for sharing your thoughts and insights. This has been such a great conversation. A big thanks also to Charlie Stewart, Amanda Reiki, and the teams at Rogerwilco and ovatoyou for their collaboration on the report and on this webinar series. If you've enjoyed this webinar, we've got another one happening tomorrow at noon. And the recordings for all 3 of the webinars in this series will be made available. So not to be missed. And the digital customer experience report is available for download on all of our websites.